They were just, yeah, just little things, I think. And overall, I was really happy with it.
Or do you want me to, Kristen, do you want me to put the document up on the screen?
I don't think it's necessary. I'm not really gonna go through it in any great level of detail. Just, sort of touch on some points. Try to discussion.
Yeah, if you were gonna get to that level of editing, I was gonna offer you the computer. I was not gonna try to do that. So we're live streaming now, and this is the Complete Streets Advisory Council on November 2nd at 4:06 p.m. And I'm Emily Flynn, I'm the Director of Health and Wellness for the City of Kingston, and I'm the liaison for this council, and I'm just gonna have everyone do a round of introductions. Claudette, when I go with you, we'll go around to your room that way.
Claudette Ford, member of Complete Streets Advisory Council.
I'm Brian Slack, Principal Transportation Planner for the Ulster County Transportation Council.
I'm Kristen Wilson, Deputy Director of Planning for Ulster County.
Hi, Paul Stankus, Complete Streets member.
Paul, Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Brian Boone, Deputy Superintendent of Public Works.
Thank you. And those online, Rose and John, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Rose Quinn, Safe Pass Ulster Families for Safe Streets representative, Ulster County Traffic Safety Board member, and Complete Streets Advisory member, amongst other things, and resident of Kingston. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. John, how about yourself?
Hi, I'm John Olson. I'm a member of the community in Kingston, and I have a general interest in the topic. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. With that, I think I'll give it up to Kristen and Brian to talk about your sidewalk.
All right, sure.
Any background information you want to say this time about sidewalk task force? I guess I'm already starting it. So I'll start by saying the mayor has asked the Complete Streets Advisory Council for some suggestions on how to improve sidewalks. And so we created this sidewalk task force to concentrate on that work. And now the different members of the council did some research, and Brian Kristen volunteered to bring that information together, and now you're presenting a document with some of the summary of possible recommendations.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Emily. I guess in terms of background and process, one of the things I thought we could start with is the process, and that is emphasizing that this is very much a draft document, and I would even call it a work in progress / preliminary draft. A lot of the information that's in it shouldn't be new to members of the task force. It's really a compilation of some of the earlier research that this task force already did. What Kristen and I decided to do was take the initiative to begin to pull everything into a cohesive document, try to build a framework here of what it is we're all thinking and talking about, so that we can present a cohesive framework to the mayor, which was his request, I believe, last December 22. So what we did was take the format of the white paper approach, and it's broken into 3 sections: the introduction, then a very brief section on the methodology, and then finally recommendations. The section that I feel probably deserves the most amount of attention and emphasis from task force members is the 3rd section, and that's recommendations. Again, I really want to emphasize this point that I think we all need to have a consensus on what our recommendations are. I took an initial stab at what I thought they should be, and I think I may even have gone a little too far, because I don't want to sway the conversation that much. So I hope we can have a good discussion regarding what this task force feels the primary recommendations can be. And I also want to emphasize that, we're starting to, the people at this table are going to be more knowledgeable on the topic than virtually anybody else in the city. And we bring forth a lot of valuable information through this document. But it's not up to us to solve the problem. I don't think, I really feel that that's up to our elected officials and the mayor to decide the best course forward. So we can build that into our recommendations, but at the end of the day, I think it's okay for us to say, we've taken this to a certain point and we can step away and present the options as sort of a menu of options for our elected officials to choose from. That was what I was working toward in a product when I started to put this together.
Can I just say a
Please,
few
yeah.
background things? So when I think I did in the introduction kind of write the history of the sidewalk task force when we worked on phase one. And we worked on phase one for probably, maybe it was 2 years. And it was very iterative. So we were back and forth, back and forth. We had meetings with city staff. We had meetings with different members of the public. We had a small group of us that went through many, many drafts and of the sidewalk policy. It was a lot of back and forth over all that time. It was like a working group. And then sometimes we invited different people from the building department, from DPW. And then we presented it to the council, and then they had questions, and then we went back, so there was a lot of back and forth, but we didn't have all this public process for that year or two before, where we were going through a lot of different drafts. So that's just another question I wanted to bring up, that I don't think that we need to have this task force if we, after today we get comments and we want to work on this draft in many, many versions. We may need to hold more meetings, if we want to do it quicker and not have them all be like official public meetings. That's my.
And since you're bringing that up, so if some of you, I think, saw that Tanya was asking for the documents and things to be done in a very public, open meeting law manner, and so I reached out to the Corporation Council for clarity, and I did some research myself in open meetings law. And it seems very clear to me that the Complete Streets Advisory Council itself may not be a public body that is subject to the open meeting law. And what's more, a working group, a subcommittee of Complete Streets Advisory Council, I think is even less of a public body that is subject to the open meeting law. And I can, if you all want me to, I can email this out to everyone and I can send you a link to the open meeting law itself. And then the way that the New York State organizes the open meeting law is that there is a set of, what do they call them? Advisory opinions from the Committee on Open something. So there's a New York State committee that publishes advisory opinions, and my understanding is that this is like a set of lawyers, they're interpreting the law. And there's an opinion there that very clearly says that it has to be a governing body, and if they have a committee that typically includes persons other than the members of the governing body, and then further down they say, therefore, an advisory body, such as a citizens advisory committee, would not, in my opinion, be subject to open meetings law, even if a member of the governing body or staff of the agency participates. So all that to say, I don't think that we have to, I think that we have every right to do a working group and not have it be a public meeting and have the drafts not be published. If we have a Complete Streets Advisory Council meeting, I still strongly recommend that we should live stream it, have an agenda, do motions. I just think that it's lovely to have that be public, but I think a working group, like you're mentioning, does not need to be as public.
There's no need for that.
And I'm happy to share out any of this information
Right.
to dig deeper.
And again, I feel this document, this is a 13-page document, I really feel it's a starting point. And I think it needs more work. And how we do that work, maybe Google Docs is the best way to go. I think that's what we've worked with in the past. And I think that's probably where we should go back to as we provide further iterative comments on this document. I'd be comfortable with that.
Well, and that's also just in line with a lot, like even if you're foiled, if you, they're, I think as representatives of the community or people who have a strong interest and people who are active working force members who will provide comments, sometimes you have an idea and you just want to share it, and you might throw out your idea that's yourself. You know, you may have an idea, want to write a comment, and then you say, oh, and then somebody else comments back and you say, oh yeah, my idea wasn't the best idea, I'm going to throw that out. But then if it's in a public meeting, somebody picks up on that, it gets in the newspaper, you know, so that's not really fair, and it doesn't allow for, I think, an honest sharing of ideas. And so I think that's the reason to do it in a more of a working group manner. And then when we have a draft that we have consensus about, then we can share it with the Complete Streets Advisory Council in a more public way. Sounds good.
So back to the working draft, there's a great introduction that I think that Kristen wrote and provide some input on. It gives the background and history of how we got here. And there's also additional documentation that we've been digging up that documents the original sidewalk district proposal that was prepared. So that can be part of our body of information as well that I think we'll share with the task force members. So just keep that in mind. But then, you know, I used to do quite a few what we call local law reviews or gaps analyses in my old job, where you review the code of a municipality and put it up against a framework to see how well it meets certain requirements. Does it have a good, you know, how does your local law address stormwater? And you show the gaps, and whatever the issue was. So we always use the framework using a matrix, a table. And I think it starts to help. I really feel like there's if-then logic to this process. If the city chooses a certain way to go forward, then there will clearly be some sort of set of consequences and things that will follow. I had hoped to create a flow chart that really starts to diagram that. I was not able to do that. It's still a goal, an aspirational goal that would show if the city actually implements, for example, a sidewalk fee district, then this is who is affected in terms of cost, in terms of departments, et cetera, to get a sense of the expectations, because then it becomes a document and a framework that decision makers can really begin to weigh the pros and cons. We've gotten there somewhat with the summary table in the appendix that shows all the different approaches that we've researched. And so what I did was categorize those approaches into, I think, 5 categories that are based on the responsible party, primarily, which is either the property owner or the city in these instances. And then how is it paid for? And then it gets into either through a general fund or a variation therein, or through the taxpayer somehow, or perhaps a mix. And so that's how, based on all the examples that we saw in the documents that we reviewed, the Seattle paper was one of the best because it had multiple examples. We started to drop the information into that framework so that we can start to make sense of these various and sundry approaches. And so that's how the paper is set up. But then again, we get into the recommendations section 3. This is the section that I feel requires the greatest amount of work. It begins on page 3. Right now, because it was the only cohesive recommendation that we otherwise had, I put the sidewalk improvement district at the top. Whether this group agrees that that should be the way forward or not is up to the group to decide. I don't want to imply that that's my preference. And then it's sort of, I wouldn't say it falls apart, but it gets a little more nebulous, the document after that, in laying out recommendations. Clearly, there needs to be enforcement somehow, an enforcement component. It seems to me that the Building Safety and Zoning Enforcement Department would be the department to do that. I'm not sure. How gaps are addressed in the city sidewalk is a big question for whatever framework is used. We have entire neighborhoods that do not have sidewalks. So there are implications regarding the methodology that's selected may not address those streets with a good framework going forward for funding. And then financing the costs associated. There seem to be a number of options available to us, and I've always thought from the beginning that the entire approach is going to probably have to be multifaceted. That it would probably be best if there were some sort of cost share mechanism so that low-income property owners could have a means of meeting the requirements of the law, if that's the case, without breaking the bank, without losing their home. And there's methods to do that as well. And then obviously administration is a big part of it too. So there's somebody's going to have to take on that burden of administering a sidewalk program, be it new employees in either engineering, DPW, your buildings and code enforcement. There's got to be some expansion of capacity to manage a sidewalk improvement program of some sort. So that's it, and that's the long and short of it. I mean, none of the information in here is really new. We've just tried to organize it in a way that helps to facilitate discussion and communication of the issue. So given that, I'm open to any questions or comments. But I think what I would like to see is people to just continue to review it and then start to perhaps comment through a Google Doc and start to formulate some recommendations.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that I was out for a couple of days when I thought we were going to be finishing unexpectedly. So I didn't get a chance to really go through it again, and we added some pros and cons columns, and I wanted to go through the other Google document that you had worked on and really pull some of those things in. So I didn't, if you see that things are missing, they probably are because I didn't get a chance to kind of pour through all of that. And I was thinking of other pros and cons even just now when Brian was talking. That could be added to each of the different kinds of programs.
Is there any sort of due date, for lack of a better word, or do we want to set one? We want to have this ready to go to the mayor?
I think it's always good to have a deadline.
Yeah, just because I feel like it's it's already been going on for so long, and I don't know.
I mean, I think that if the mayor is going to be at all open to doing a referendum, it's probably good to have him thinking about that in January.
Yeah, I guess you could work backwards, right? So it'd have to be November, the referendum, and then you have to do all the.
Yeah, I can't remember the timelines. I think we wrote the timeline somewhere. I can look for that, but that I don't remember the timelines, but yeah, he would. I think a due date for this would be like January.
Okay.
Would be good to get it done.
Yeah, I think that's doable. I mean, it's
Like end of January or beginning of January?
yeah.
Maybe the end of January.
Yeah, the beginning of January. That's
December,
not a big deadline for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say that would be a good timeline. So that would mean having some more intense, maybe meeting more
Yeah,
frequently
2 more months
between now
of
and.
work on it.
Yeah.
Depending on, so then that would be additional meetings than what's already on the calendar for streets.
Yeah,
Just put that.
But maybe a little, they don't have to be an hour and a half, maybe they're more like working group. We just touch base about a few things or.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any comments, feedback on what we have so far? I hope it works for everybody. And again, I don't have any pride of authorship here either. So I can't speak for Kristen, because Kristen wrote a good part of it too.
No, I don't.
So this is gonna be a product of the task force. It's not a product of the planning department.
John put on his camera. John, you want
Oh, hi. I just want to say I really like the document and I appreciate it. For someone who wasn't familiar with the history of this, like I will say it was very, very comprehensive and very easy to like catch up. So thank you. And I couldn't help but notice there was mention of like in one part of the document about like a sidewalk width. I think it said like 5 feet. I couldn't help but notice the form-based code comes with another set of standards, the code that the city enacted this year. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to align like some of the things that we're doing with respect to like the sidewalk infrastructure with the form-based code standards.
That's a great point. I did not write anything about that in this introduction because I kind of skipped out just personally, on a personal level, I skipped out. I went work in a different field for a little while the form-based code was being developed. So I didn't follow that very closely, and I'm not really sure how the form-based code changed the chapter.
It's a very good point, John, and it has not been factored in as heavily. Another issue that was raised by engineering is we referenced just very generally the ADA, but John Schulteis indicated the PROWAG, the Public Rights of Way guidance is now might be the law of the land, which is separate from the Americans with Disabilities Act guidance. So that's something that needs to be factored in as well, just to clarify right up front what the guiding standards are for sidewalks to begin with.
Yeah.
I think it would be if people are going to be, I mean, it depends on the solution, right? But I think if people are going to be starting from scratch, it might be, it might be cool to like, make the sidewalks wider or like take some of the street away, like things like that, and some of the forms factor that in, like I guess it depends on where you're doing it, but it would be cheaper, I think, to do that like once than to do the sidewalks and then do the street second, like sort of combine projects in a way.
Yeah, I think that the introduction deserves a whole, like maybe a couple of paragraphs with what happened with the form-based code, which I didn't follow. Did anybody else follow that very well? We might need to ask Bartek.
That's what I was gonna suggest.
Yeah.
is Someone has a conversation with Bartek, and then we get really accurate information.
Yeah.
That's a good point, just we have a great opportunity to incorporate the new form-based code into all this work.
And have that continuity.
Yeah.
Although I think that the form-based code or whatever the standards are for sidewalks is actually a different problem than what we're trying to address here, which is the funding mechanism.
Right, it's true,
So-
and enforcement and implementation as well. And we don't want to, confound the issue too much.
Yeah, I think,
But a quick review
Yeah.
certainly of form-based code to make sure everything
And
is.
it could almost be just like a footnote to sort of say like, to ensure that whoever is implemented in terms of sidewalk is adhering to the form-based code. Something along those lines.
I mean, I think it would have to anyway.
Yeah,
Right,
but I
like,
think
if
a
you-
mention of it.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Rose. Can I jump in for just a second? I'm on a weird mode on my phone here. It's the only way I can do this.
Yeah, go for Rose.
So, so along the lines of what John is saying, have we looked to NOCTO guidelines? I know that they have some really clear guidelines on sidewalks, and since the city has adopted NOCTO, are we looking through it through that lens, and also the safe systems lens? I mean, I think that's those are both really important things to incorporate. You know, traditionally we've left out a lot of explicit safety language, which now really does need to be incorporated in. So how are we handling that, and have we considered that part? So thanks.
No, I would just mirror what Kristen had just said. I mean, we have to stay focused on this task. The task is to, how do we implement sidewalk improvements in the city of Kingston? And I think if you read through the paper, there's a limited body of approaches to implement sidewalk improvements. I mean, what the guidance that dictates the construction of those sidewalks is not really the question here. And so NACTO standards, safe systems approaches, things of that nature, they certainly are important, but it's not the question that we're trying to answer. And I think if we continue to get distracted by some of these questions, we're not going to come to a conclusion to what's already gone on for a year. We're simply trying to find, how do we enforce sidewalk improvements, period. And the improvements, I think, again, as John had mentioned, the form-based code has standards and guidelines. That is the law of the land for new sidewalks in the city of Kingston. We know that that's the law. And so those are the standards that everyone has to meet today. The question is, how do you pay for them, and how do you do it uniformly throughout the city implementing it? It's either the city has to enforce the current code and force property owners to do the improvements themselves, and or we need to find another way to pay for them. What's that mechanism to pay for them? I think those are really the only choices that we have to, the menu that's in front of us here.
Yeah, I think that phase one was getting at what you were asking about, Rose, and I think there's opportunity to revisit phase one. Although I think we should look at the form-based code and see if the form-based code may already incorporate NACTO standards, and the city's adopted them. So hypothetically, that's already addressed. Like but maybe not. Maybe we need to go back and revisit phase one. But this is phase two, which is focused on how do we fund it and like make it happen. Which it's sort of like, well, phase one is, or the standards are kind of moot if we never actually build or change anything. So that I think this goes hand in hand with what you're saying, but it is like a different question.
Yeah, I mean, I totally, I agree with what you're both saying. I know that we have to stay on track. However, there is the opportunity for grant funding if we do tie this into safe system. And there is more opportunity. And, I think ultimately it would be interesting to really explore the opportunity of actually having a true general fund set aside to take care of the sidewalks in Kingston. I mean, I think if we did more of incorporating those kinds of standards in, we would have a better shot of having that happen. That's my only point here, but thank you.
But the standards are incorporated in. I mean, the new form-based code does reference NACTO standards, does it not? Or we need to confirm.
Yeah, we need to answer that question.
Yeah.
I think your question's a good one, Rose, and we need to answer that question. Does form-based, has that already happened with the construction guidelines in the form-based code and in the code itself?
But again, we're not asked to make huge revisions to the zoning code, which was just updated here. Which that would be a step.
The presumption is that whatever sidewalks are built are going to adhere to the form-based code.
Yeah.
Has these baked into it. So yeah.
Yeah. And if it's not baked into it, then that's another project.
And the PROWAG, which is the law, I believe the law of land, that's the I already said what the acronym stands for, and I can't even remember it.
Public right of way.
Public right of way accessibility guidelines. And those guidelines dictate a minimum of 5-foot widths. Where not practical, you can do 3-foot widths if you have an obstruction. You can only have a 1/4 inch lift between pads. You can only have so much, you know, the standards are already pretty strict, that property owners have to stick to at this point. So.
That was all written into the code when we did it in 2017.
Right.
But, yeah.
I don't know if this answers the question, but I did find in the zoning code a listing of the sidewalk widths, which are very clear, and the minimum width is 5 feet. So that doesn't necessarily answer the NACDO question, but there is that.
Yeah, we can explore that. We can write some paragraphs about that, in the introduction.
Does it go into detail on materials?
It does.
Yeah.
We did, yeah.
We did, unless it changed it.
Including permeable concrete in certain areas, when bluestone is appropriate. And I mean, Ryan can attest to the standards for concrete, that they need to meet. It's pretty strict.
One thing that I have a comment on, is that if the sidewalk improvement district is something that the council does want to recommend, I think that it would require a strong education campaign, about, and we actually started working on this back when we were working back on it. Back in 2018 or 2019, we started working on FAQ documents and having a very strong education campaign done by the city about how the sidewalk code currently works. Because if you go out today and ask most people, most of them might not know that they're responsible for maintaining the sidewalk. They might know that they need to shovel it or that sort of thing, but they don't know that they're responsible for repairing it. So there's that. There's just so many nuances to this that folks don't understand from like the baseline. And so if they don't understand the baseline and then you say, oh, would you like to add a fee? You know, of course, everyone's gonna say no, right? So I think it's important for the city to do a very strong education campaign about that first. And present the problem that we're dealing with as a task force.
I had a number of
yeah.
thoughts about that sort of thing, thinking about the education down the road. Like, there's even one of the cities that phrased theirs as wherever it was deserved sidewalks. Like, that was what the referendum was called. And I was like, yeah, calling it something like Kingston deserves sidewalks. It's like, that's the positive spin on it. It's like, yes, that's something that everyone deserves to have in this town, is to have a sidewalk to walk from one point to another, instead of looking at it as a burdensome tax or something like that.
Yeah, like I think that the narrative of how we explain it is really important. And so the education of what the problem is. Because the people who just say, oh, you're just trying to add another tax to me. Well, no, we're trying to solve a community problem that is difficult to solve.
I do think that the education program as to what the homeowners, property owners' responsibility is for their sidewalks is very important, because other than shoveling snow, people just don't realize that they are responsible currently for the safe passage on their sidewalk. And they don't do it.
Because without enforcement, there's nothing to remind them.
Exactly. So there needs to be, as part of the education, some way of informing before you do enforcement as to, do you know that as a property owner, you are responsible for this? Do you know, something like that and, fun ways of getting it done? But that does have to happen because most of the sidewalks, many of the sidewalks aren't passable, mainly because the property owners are not doing what they need to do to maintain it. So before you put in a sidewalk improvement district that may add an additional percentage to your sewer fee or whatever, however you decide to fund it, you do need to do that kind of education.
And I like the phrasing in the first section where it would reduce the burden, like the sidewalk improvement district would reduce the burden on the property owner, assuming that enforcement is actually done, because then they would have to shoulder the costs. But the district might be taxed, but then the city is then doing the sidewalk.
Right, but that's assuming they know what the burden is. It's hard to reduce a burden when you have no idea.
Exactly, so it's
Yes.
almost like you almost go around doing education,
You don't know.
ticketing,
You don't know.
you
You don't-
would be ticketed
But-
$200
Right.
if this is actually enforced.
Right.
No, it would be more than $200.
Yes,
If the city enforced the code, it would be, you need to rebuild your sidewalk today, or you're gonna get a lien, the city's gonna come and do it and put a lien on your property, and that could mean $5,000-$10,000,
Yeah.
that could be a lot of
Sure.
money. So I think that the education campaign could be dual-fold, like it could be towards the sidewalk improvement district, or it could be towards, okay, well, if we don't do the sidewalk improvement district, then here are some other options which we've laid out. Like, we might be able to do enforcement, but have a program for low income, like, and so the community understands what the problem is, and it's not just the government coming in and like taking.
So if you decide that you do want to do, let's just say the decision is made that, no, we're not doing an overall sewer, sidewalk improvement district. Well, you've been made aware of what your responsibilities are as a property owner, homeowner. This is what you can do. And, oh, by the way, if you can't afford to do this, here are some methods of financing this particular situation so that it is not burdensome,
And those are laid out in this paper already, that we took examples from other cities. And again, I will still try to endeavor to get toward like a decision tree flow chart here, because I really feel that if the fee district is proposed by referendum, and that we do a good education campaign, the public needs to know that if it gets voted down, there are still consequences.
Exactly.
That means, okay, the city is gonna start to enforce its code aggressively. I wrote those words into the paper, I maybe wanna remove that. But I mean, personally, that's how, because right now, I feel it would be somewhat unfair for the city to just pop in and say, now we're gonna start enforcing it. It might be a little arbitrary and capricious, without any warning. And I don't know if it's been enforced, I don't think it's been enforced at all.
Without a 311 call, yeah.
Right. So once you go through the referendum, if it were to be voted down, then, hey, it's gonna get real. That would be great to see, I think. Especially if we have mechanisms in place to assist low-income folks, to encourage through incentives like cost shares. If we could get some sort of grant funding in place and perhaps some seed money through fines and fees of other sorts. Like I propose taking a portion of your CDBG funds, existing parking fines.
Yeah, meters, you said it.
What was?
Even meters, parking meters.
Yeah, even parking meter
That kind of
fees,
fun.
there's start to cobble together some funds so we can actually start to have a regenerative funding source to defer and defray costs for the public. It's a long and winding path here of decisions that folks are gonna have to make in positions of leadership here at the city. So I just hope that we have clarified what the issue is to this paper. That's really what I feel the task is in front of us.
Do we have a group of working, I mean, Paul, I know you, and then Gustavo, was he working, like, is he here? Oh,
He said he couldn't make it.
Okay. Do we have a clear group of working people that want to be on the Google document and making comments or edits?
Sure.
Probably define that more clearly.
Yeah,
Like Ella has expressed that she's not interested.
okay,
John has expressed interest.
okay.
Rose appears to be interested.
Yeah, I can jump in.
Yeah, we also had some people, like with phase one, we had some people who were just like, they weren't complete streets advisory council members, they just, like Kevin McAvoy was involved and someone from the, I'm trying to remember her name, she was from the Conservation Advisory Council. She wasn't.
Sarah, Mike,
No, it wasn't Sarah.
Well, Helen right now is our connection. She's,
The council.
Helen is the Conservation Advisory Council liaison for complete.
I mean, I'm not saying that she'd be on it, I'm just saying that, I'm just giving the example that we had people who were not complete streets advisory councils, like, I don't know, John or there's another person here. You know,
Mike, yeah.
like, you know, they don't have to be advisory council members, but they may want to be on the working group to give input.
What about someone from the school? Has anyone approached any, like, you know, maybe someone from George Washington? They have a walking school bus. They might be a really great asset to a sidewalk task force. Just a thought.
Do you recommend something?
I would, but I don't know if they'd be interested. Yeah, Kimmer over at George Washington, you know, they have they have a really robust walking school bus program over there. And maybe if not her, maybe she has somebody else on staff in mind who might be interested. It's worth a shot. I mean, and there's also, you know, there's other you know, stuff going on at some of the other schools. I mean, I'm not in the school districts, so I don't know as well, but I imagine that most of them would have some concern party, like if we sent a letter to PTAs or, you know.
Rose, I wasn't suggesting that we like grow the sidewalk task force in a great manner. I was just saying who here now wants to be on the Google Docs and participate in, because if we're trying to pull together this by January, trying to do public outreach and get more people involved, I think that complicates things because there's, I mean, as all of you know, there's an education, right?
And maybe that's another
understanding the
phase.
program.
That's
maybe
the
that's
sort
the
of
next
people
phase.
you want to be
Yeah,
involved with, getting people to basically get off the boat or whatever, or
Yeah.
people on your side.
Yeah, that would be
Those
like
are the people who
during the
want
end.
to then
Advocate for one funding source or another.
Yeah.
like the next phase, you know, that where we really are doing like public comment on some of the ideas we have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We should say.
definitely. Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought that's what you were asking.
That's what I'm asking. Who's gonna be in it with us for the next 2 months? John, did you want to say something? You showed up.
Well, I just wanted to share that I live on one of those blocks that has like 5 or 6 different sidewalk treatments, you know, like people have just done their best over the years, you can tell. And I've been getting some like I talked to my neighbors, right? And we've been talking about the problem like over the last few years, like just over the fence, I guess. And we've talked about like signing a petition and just getting signatures together to like help this cause. It's really nice to see that like there's energy being expended on it like at this level. I'd be happy to help from that perspective, you know, like as someone who is like living, you know, like talking about this with their neighbors. So I don't know if you think of an opportunity there. I could probably get some signatures in my district. I think it's 9. I'm on Delaware Ave, like off of Broadway. And I don't know, I can like write a letter or, provide feedback on this document. Like, I'm happy to do that as well. Just, let me know.
Thank you. I want to emphasize the document's not done, so let's focus the feedback with the task force until it's done and hopefully early January. I would like to see the task force start to focus on what are the recommendations, what are the preferences? And that could allow us to create a nice flow diagram that will relatively allow decision makers to take a quick look and say, okay, these are the options and this is what happens when, because right now there's still a lot there. It needs a little more organization.
And I think the
I
sidewalk.
can help structure that a bit. I don't have a copy of Visio, but I'm sure I could get one. You'd use a Visio for that, right?
I'm not sure. That's a good recommendation, John. I think you just volunteered.
Yeah, I think maybe I've used that. If that's like a software, online software to.
Yeah, Visio is great for making like business intelligence type diagrams. It's very user friendly too.
Cool.
It's spelled Vizio. It's what all those management consultant type folks use nowadays,
Wait, you were saying something, Paul?
Well, I was just gonna say that I think, and obviously not speak for everyone, but I think the Sidewalk Improvement District is the way that this has kind of been going the whole time. I can't speak for before I was a member of CSAC, but I think that even back then, it was probably what you would assume was gonna happen if it was gonna happen.
I think when we look at the city of Ithaca and how and that's what it's modeled after, and how things have improved in Ithaca. It's been a few years since I've been there, but I really was quite astounded by the quality of sidewalks in a very, it's a city that shares.
City.
It is, and the topography is very similar, in that it's on a hill.
Yeah.
And we have serious challenges here and similar challenges here in Kingston. And it's been effective. And very interestingly enough, if you look into the examples, the city of Denver very recently adopted the same approach. And if you start to Google it, there's some really interesting letters to the editor for and against the approach that I think we can learn from. If we were to go that route, that we can really gain some significant insight from how it's unfolded in Denver within just in the past 2 years, I think.
Even using examples from these other cities of before and after shots and that sort of thing, and sort of thinking about the future here and sort of an education or whatever it might be, to use those places that have done these things already.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna hide that I've always been a proponent of that. I don't think it's a perfect system, the sidewalk improvement district, but I did know, I read through this, there was a Seattle document that I think some of you have taken a look at, and I use that a lot as we were creating this, because they had consultants who did a good analysis of sidewalk programs around the country. They were doing that. They were doing what we're doing basically for the city of Seattle.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they had noticed was the large volume of repairs that were completed for Ithaca in a short period of time. And so I just think that the sidewalk improvement district, and we didn't really put in pros and cons here, but I'd like to flesh that out a little bit more. I do think that you can make a lot happen quickly. And also, it's sort of like the grant programs that we've gotten for Henry or.
Yeah.
I know they're problematic and challenging, but you can do a whole road and do it. You can incorporate more, I think, more safety measures, more of the NACTO guidelines, with the corners, and you can do it so that the sidewalks are more uniform in a neighborhood rather than with all of the other approaches, it's going to be ad hoc.
Like John was saying, Delaware, it's just 5 different materials used.
Even different days that concrete is poured, it sets differently.
Sure.
Right.
It delaminates if it's too wet. dries out. So if it's all poured systematically, it's more uniform.
I think the quality control is more difficult for, when property owners are
Absolutely.
overseeing the
I
project.
mentioned that
And-
in my comments.
And I think it's actually administratively more burdensome for the city. Because you're gonna have to manage, you've gotta manage all these sidewalk permits, all that, and then you've gotta manage a program, a CDBG program. You've gotta manage how other funds are gonna come in, you know, if you're using parking ticket fees or
Oh, yeah.
whatever it is, there's a lot to manage in that. So I actually think it would take more staff.
Yeah.
Than if you had the sidewalk improvement district, then you've got engineering staff. And you can hire,
It's also not a steady funding source when you do it like that. You might have higher revenues on parking fees, some years, different things change, whereas with the set aside district, you know what your funding levels are gonna be. And you can predict how much you can get done or not get done.
And it pays for professional staff to manage the program, which
Which is important.
It's very important to, in the city of Ithaca, they have an engineer, his name escapes me, I've seen him give several presentations. He is a PE and he manages the program, from the financial side and administrative side and knows how to install sidewalks.
His name should be like Sam, he'd be like Sidewalk Sam.
and then you have an expert who's
Yeah.
doing it on a regular basis, knows all the issues, where if you do the other things, now you've got property owners making decisions about trees and sidewalks, it's hard,
Right.
for property owner. So I won't hide my preference for the sidewalk improvement district, but I know it's a heavy lift.
Right,
Yeah, Parks and Recreation or
This is Complete Streets Advisory Council.
sorry.
yeah, it's okay. I think the district personally is gonna be a hard sell. I'm on the fence. I've lived in two different neighborhoods in Kingston, and they didn't have sidewalks. So as a property owner, and I don't think these streets would rank as a high priority for sidewalks, because they don't have a lot of through traffic. And so as a property owner, I'm stuck with a decision, do I wanna take on another fee when?
Right.
And we know that the benefit is for everyone in the city.
That's gonna be part of the
It's a
education.
hard sell.
It's because even people who are gonna be on this 30-year arc at the end of, if you're gonna be in year 29, it's like, well, what am I like paying
Yeah.
30 years
Not
and
gonna
I'm
be
not even
around.
gonna see this thing, so it's gonna be, all that stuff's gonna be a hard sell.
Right. And those neighborhoods there are entire neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks. How we address those, if a district is put in place,
Yeah,
it will not be easy, still, so.
I think there's like a new music venue on Beale Street and you can't walk to it. It's ridiculous. I could walk there from my house if there's a sidewalk. Instead, if you want to walk, you have to walk along Beale Street, which no one's gonna do. It's insane, you know? It's not just insane.
Yeah.
It's like all these things, it's common.
The goal is a walkable city, it's what we have to do.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. It's not easy for any city, but at some point, you just have to say, this is where we're going forward. It's either voted up or down. Yeah.
And I have to fix my sidewalk before this. Because my sidewalk is so bad on my property.
I live in one of those streets where the sidewalks are gonna be more narrow than 5 feet. Really narrow street.
I live on the steepest hill in Kingston, I think, so it won't be ADA compliant, just because I can't change the angle of the hill, but every time I fix my sidewalk before this ever gets instituted.
And the law has accommodations for all those issues. It understands the challenges of varying topography. It's been a long time since I've been through PROAC presentations, but, yeah, there are, adaptations that can be made and exceptions.
And I think it was part of the bike ped master plan, but there was a survey of sidewalks, right? And they're varying states, I think they're graded, right, I guess.
Yep.
I thought that could maybe be an appendix to this thing.
It's referenced in writing, and I think it is, I did include the link to it
Oh, okay.
as well in the end notes. That is an ArcGIS, yes, the very first reference, that was done by our office. And then, through Emily and her consultants' efforts, they did updates to it.
Yeah.
It can be updated relatively easily too. And you can make it, right now it's kind of broad brush, because it looks at almost the entire street from corner to corner.
Right.
And gives it a full score, when we
Yeah.
all know that there's varying degrees of accessibility on that street. You can make it more fine grained. We just did it, as to do it expediently.
I think those things will all go a long way towards just educating people, whether it's, anyone who goes to this dock, just how bad the sidewalks really are, and, it sort of visualizes it.
So I think is there any other feedback? I think we're still open to feedback, or we can sort of talk about next steps.
I sent my few comments were just in the doc I sent around, so.
Okay.
So Emily, can you put it up in Google Docs, circulate it to the members of the task force, and set a next date for our next meeting? But I think people really need to start to get into the document. I think right now, again, the section that needs the most amount of work is section 3. And I like John's recommendation to look at Visio, which that's been recommended to me before, and I've never used it, so.
I have it also, so, and I know John, so I can,
Oh, you have it?
yeah,
Is it free?
it's part of Microsoft Office.
Okay,
Oh, it is?
Yeah. As far as I know, John, do you want to confirm that?
Yeah, if you've got an Office 365 account, it should work.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Okay, so we have it.
There's like paid features, but as long as you're not like embedding visuals in like Power BI or something, it should be like free for the most part, I think, with the basic, yeah. I'm not a Microsoft rep, but we have those too.
we'll give it a shot. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Cool.
So as of right now, I'm just gonna invite the Complete Streets Advisory Council to maybe participate in a doodle poll to meet next. I'll make the document a Google Doc, and then we'll try to meet again.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Anything else?
Yeah, I would just suggest meeting maybe in the beginning of December. Looking at that.
Do anyone want to look at it now? I'll try to look at some potential dates.
Sure.
I think beautiful might be better.
Okay.
Just in case. Because there's other folks who aren't here.
So stick to this sort of time, 4 to 5:30, or do
Yeah,
we're sort of a mix of people who get paid to do this work and a mix of people who don't. So, yeah, if this time works, then I'm not gonna try to send a whole bunch of different times then.
Yeah. What was the date, sorry?
Sounds good.
Oh, okay,
What's that?
what's the time, yeah.
we'll do beautiful.
Okay. Any last comments, questions for today? Otherwise, we'll end our meeting a little bit early. Nice night, time for dinner.
Baby Jane,
What's that?
you want to see Baby Jane?
Besides,
John Mulaney?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Oh, you're all going, me too.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I missed out on
Let's
it.
hear our text message. Let me end this lecture. Okay. Bye, y'all.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.